I built a complete ecosystem from scratch inside a jar, starting with nothing more than a bit of dry sand, and little by little it filled with strange creatures I had never seen before. Everything seemed to be going perfectly, until something went wrong along the way, and it ended up collapsing. To understand this, let's go back to day one. I went out for a walk through the forest, looking for something interesting to film, and came across a completely dry stream bed, one that during winter had carried a large amount of water, and that is when an idea crossed my mind. Maybe there was still life left in there, waiting beneath the dry ground. Maybe, with just a little water, I could bring it back to life. The riverbed sand, completely dry after months without a single drop of water, was the first thing I added as the base of the jar. Then I picked up a few sticks I found scattered around and anything else I had within reach at that moment. Honestly, at first I was not very convinced this experiment was going to work, that I could actually bring that place back to life. I also collected roots from the edge of the stream bed, just in case they were holding eggs or some form of life simply waiting for the moisture to return. The rocks would provide shelter and structure for the ecosystem. I closed the jar and went to explore the rest of the stream bed, where I found enormous spider webs woven by spiders that had taken over the spot as their shelter. But looking closer, I discovered something even stranger. The rocks were covered in exoskeletons of aquatic insects, remains left behind by creatures that had completed their life cycle right there. The afternoon was growing dark, night would fall soon, so it was time to head back home, a fairly long walk ahead of me. Once home, before going to bed, I started the experiment. I added just a little bottled water, free of chlorine or any other treatment that could interfere with whatever might wake up inside. I sealed the jar and never opened it again. A week later, something magical happened. Looking closely, I started noticing small, almost imperceptible movements at the bottom of the jar. Creatures of every kind hidden among the grains of sand had been born right there, with shapes so extravagant they looked like they belonged to another planet. Some were barely visible to the naked eye. Others moved with no clear pattern at all, exploring this new world for the very first time. Proof that life always finds a way to push through as long as it has the right conditions to do so. The soil was crawling with worms of every kind, something I was not expecting to find in soil that had been completely dry for months. Among them, small nematodes stood out, thin, white, and elongated, moving with a characteristic wave-like motion, very different from other worms we are about to see. These small worms act as natural oxygen indicators. Their massive presence signals that oxygen levels in the water are low. What is fascinating is that they can survive with almost none of it for days, even weeks, under extreme conditions, thanks to a kind of hemoglobin of their own that gives them that distinctive reddish color. They feed on decomposing organic matter and bacteria found in the sediment, filtering it while keeping half their body buried and firmly anchored to the bottom. But this was only the beginning, because the jar was packed with far more life than I ever could have imagined from simply adding a bit of water to dry soil. A complete ecosystem had formed inside it in just a matter of days, with creatures of even stranger shapes, far faster movements, and behaviors I could barely keep up with on camera. What started as a simple experiment had turned into an entire world in miniature. Other microscopic creatures also lived at the bottom of the jar alongside the worms, ones that at first glance looked like little more than specks of dust. And as I watched them, I noticed something I had overlooked at the beginning. Barely any plants had grown inside the jar, something you will see later turned into a serious problem. And then I found a new type of worm, completely different from anything I had seen so far. White, cylindrical, and moving with such a sharp, spasmodic motion that it seemed to violently shake every few seconds. I was not able to identify exactly what species it was, but that very particular behavior made it one of the most curious creatures in the jar. If you happen to know what it is, please let me know in the comments. This image left me so stunned that it killed any desire I had to swim in a river for quite some time. But pay attention, because as we move up a bit further through the jar, other inhabitants appear, tiny snails that seem visibly uncomfortable with the sheer number of worms moving around them. These small freshwater snails gathered near the top of the jar, right where oxygen levels were higher, since they need fairly stable oxygen levels to survive. Contrary to what many people think, they do not feed solely on microplants. They also consume decomposing organic matter, helping keep the water naturally clean. And even though they may seem completely still, they are constantly moving across any available surface, scraping with a microscopic tongue covered in tiny teeth known as a radula. I was finally able to film the creatures that had me so intrigued, the true rulers of this ecosystem, copepods. These tiny crustaceans are one of the most abundant animal groups on the planet, and they feed by filtering microscopic algae and bacteria from the water. In turn, they serve as food for almost everything else, making them the very foundation of the entire food chain. And those sudden jumps that catch your eye so easily are actually their escape technique. And as it could not be any other way, where there are herbivorous creatures, there are also predators. Although since this ecosystem was still very young, this one had not grown much yet. This is a backswimmer, one of the few aquatic creatures that swims completely upside down, using its hind legs like oars to propel itself at a surprising speed while hunting. But it was not alone, because even it should be careful around the other predator I found. This is the larva of a damselfly, easily recognizable by those three tail-like structures at the end of its abdomen, which are not actually tails at all, but gills, responsible for letting it breathe underwater throughout this entire stage of its life. Despite being a tremendously voracious predator, it seemed annoyed by the constant stream of creatures crawling all over it. Just like dragonfly larvae, it has an extendable jaw known as a mask, capable of shooting forward in a fraction of a second to grab its prey before it even has a chance to react. And over time, as it keeps growing, it will be capable of devouring practically everything alive inside this jar. This larva can spend over a year completely underwater before becoming an adult, shedding its skin several times throughout that period until it finally climbs out of the water to complete its final transformation in open air. And I'm almost certain that those empty shells I found among the rocks of the river belonged to this very same type of creature. And then something terrible happened. I left the ecosystem forgotten for a month, and when I finally picked the jar back up, everything had changed completely. The water had turned dark, thick, almost opaque, and there was no sign of movement anywhere inside. The creatures had all perished. The entire ecosystem had collapsed, left in an eerie stillness. I assumed the cause had been the lack of plants. The oxygen had simply run out completely. What was once a world full of life was now nothing more than a desolate place.